She lost a son, was betrayed and humiliated. He buried his grief in meetings and built impenetrable walls around his heart. And 2 children, orphaned by their mother, learned to see love as a threat. When Tabitha accepts a simple job in a luxurious mansion to try and start over, she doesn't imagine she'll rediscover her own strength there, but also the man who would change everything. Amidst betrayals, revenge, and secrets from the past, a story unfolds about invisible scars, unexpected, new beginnings, and the power of forgiveness. But is love enough to heal what life has destroyed? This story will leave you speechless. Subscribe to the channel and comment from what city you're listening. The sun of Los Angeles drew long shadows on the marble floor of the Sterling mansion as Tabitha Freire crossed those imposing gates for the first time. The neighborhood of Beverly Hills, an affluent area of Los Angeles, seemed a world apart with its sumptuous homes protected by high walls and discreet security systems. Tabitha took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in her hands as she adjusted the simple bun that held her wavy blonde hair. The gardener pointed the way with a nod. She walked along the avenue of ancient trees, carrying only a small purse and the invisible weight of everything she had lost. Her blue eyes, almost transparent in their clarity, held a melancholy that not even her polite smile could disguise. "The staff entrance is around back," a middle-aged woman informed her dryly when Tabitha reached the front door. "I'm Mrs. Stern, the housekeeper. Mr. Sterling was very specific about your duties." Tabitha nodded, swallowing her discomfort. Just 2 years ago, she received patients in her pediatrician's office with the same air of authority as this woman. Now she followed silently through the mansion's corridors, like a shadow that should go unnoticed. "You'll mainly take care of the children and the organization of the rooms on the 2nd floor. Meals are my responsibility, but you can help in the kitchen when asked," Mrs. Stern continued, looking her up and down. "Mr. Sterling works a lot and is rarely home before dinner." The 2nd floor of the mansion was a separate universe, decorated with original artwork and furniture that looked like it came out of architecture magazines. Tabitha felt small in that environment, where each object probably cost more than all. Her possessions put together. "Your room is here, next to the children's," said Mrs. Stern, opening a simple door. "Keep yourself available. They might need you at any time." The room was larger than Tabitha expected, with a window that offered a view of the impeccably manicured garden. It wasn't luxurious like the rest of the house, but it was light years ahead of the tiny apartment she had rented after selling everything she had to pay off debts. "The children get back from school at 4. Mr. Sterling asked that you be prepared to receive them." The housekeeper paused as if carefully choosing her next words. "They're demanding. Their mother passed away 3 years ago, and no nanny has managed to stay for more than 2 months. When the door closed, Tabitha sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to breathe deeply. The reality of her new life hit her hard. She, who had spent 6 years in medical school, specializing in pediatrics, now depended on the generosity of strangers to start over. The soft touch of her cell phone interrupted her thoughts. It was a message from her friend Laura, the only one who had remained by her side when everything fell apart. "So, what's the billionaire's house like? Have you run into him yet?" Tabitha smiled sadly as she typed, "Not yet. But the house is exactly as you'd imagine, big, cold and intimidating, like the owner, from what they say." She didn't have time to elaborate. A noise in the hallway caught her attention. Children's voices mixed with the sound of hurried footsteps. Tabitha checked the clock. Only 2 in the afternoon. The children had arrived early. "I don't want another nanny. I don't need anyone taking care of me." The sharp, angry voice came from a girl. Tabitha took a deep breath, adjusted her simple but impeccable clothes, and went out into the hallway. That's when she came face to face with Milena Sterling, an 8-year-old girl with perfectly combed black hair, held back with a pink tiara, wearing a dress that looked like it came out of a fairy tale. Beside her, Enrico, the older brother, watched her over his glasses with an expression of calculated boredom, his tablet firmly in his hands. "Hello, I'm Tabitha," she introduced herself with a calm voice, the same one she used to reassure scared children in her office. "You must be Milena and Enrico." "We know who we are," Enrico replied dryly, without taking his eyes off the screen. "We don't need you to tell us." Milena took a step forward, her eyes sparkling with defiance. "You're just another one who's going to leave soon. They all do." The girl crossed her arms. "Dad only hired you because he doesn't have time for us." Tabitha felt a pang in her chest. Not because of the hostility, she was prepared for that, but because of the poorly disguised sadness behind those sharp words. Wounded children had always been her specialty. "Well, I'm here now," she replied gently, "and I'd like to get to know you better, if you give me the chance." "We don't want to know you," Milena retorted, but her voice trembled slightly. "And if you try to steal our mother's place, you'll regret it." Before Tabitha could respond, an imposing presence filled the hallway. Tall, broad-shouldered, with wavy brown hair and piercing green eyes, Heiter Sterling looked even more impressive than in the photos that occasionally appeared in business magazines. His cold gaze quickly scanned the scene before landing on Tabitha. "Miss Freer, I presume." His voice was deep and controlled. "I didn't expect to find you already interacting with my children." "They arrived early from school, Mr. Sterling," she replied, maintaining her composure despite the sudden nervousness that his presence provoked. "Dad!" Milena ran to hug him. Heitor briefly stroked his daughter's hair, but his eyes did not leave Tabitha. "We don't need her. We can stay with Mrs. Stern." "We've already discussed this, Milena," he replied firmly. "Miss Freire has experience with children and will be here to assist you when I can't be present." Tabitha noticed Enrico's curious look. "Experience with children?" the boy asked, finally raising his eyes from the tablet. "Do you have kids?" The question hit Tabitha like a physical blow. For a moment, she felt breathless, and the world spun around her. The memories she was trying to keep locked away threatened to overflow. The baby's room painted soft yellow, the small jumpsuit she had bought as soon as she knew the sex, the feeling of life growing inside her, followed by the piercing pain of loss. "No," she finally replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I worked with children for many years." Heitor watched her intently, as if trying to decipher a riddle. "Miss Freire was recommended by a trusted agency. Her credentials are adequate for the position. What he didn't mention was that he knew exactly who she was. His human resources department had done a thorough investigation of Tabitha Freire, a formerly respected pediatrician who had disappeared from the medical scene after a personal tragedy. What intrigued Heitor was why someone with that training had applied for a job as a housemaid. "I'll leave you to get to know each other," Heitor said finally. "I have a meeting in 30 minutes. Children, behave. Miss Freire, my office is at the end of the hall if you need anything." When Heitor walked away, Milena turned her attention to Tabitha, her eyes sparkling with childish determination. "I'm going to test you. All the others gave up." "I'm not like the others," Tabitha replied with a serene smile, despite the inner turmoil that still troubled her from the question about children. That afternoon, Milena made a point of spilling juice on her new dress and blaming Tabitha. Enrico locked himself in his room, refusing to come out even when she called him for a snack. But Tabitha didn't waver. With patience, she taught Milena how to remove the stain with a simple trick without scolding her. For Enrico, she left a sandwich and a note by the door, for when hunger is greater than stubbornness. While making the beds for the night, Tabitha, found under Milena's pillow a crumpled photo of a beautiful woman with the same black hair as the girl, embracing Hater and the children. Everyone was smiling genuinely, without the tense expressions they now wore. Carefully, Tabitha smoothed the photo and put it back exactly as it was. At night, while the children slept, she watched the Los Angeles sky from her room window. The city lights transformed the darkness into a carpet of artificial stars. Tabitha thought about how life could change so drastically. 2 years ago, she diagnosed diseases and saved lives. Now she was trying to save herself in a universe for which she had never prepared. It was at that moment that she heard a sharp scream coming from Milena's room. Without hesitating, Tabitha ran down the hall and opened the door. The girl was sitting in bed, tears streaming down her face, trembling visibly. "Nightmare?" Tabitha asked softly, keeping her distance so as not to scare her even more. Milena nodded, still sobbing. It was Mom. She was leaving again. Tabitha sat on the edge of the bed. "May I?" she asked, indicating the space next to the girl. When Milena nodded, she approached carefully. "Do you want to tell me about your dream?" "You wouldn't understand," Milena murmured. "Maybe not," Tabitha admitted. "But sometimes, sharing a nightmare is like opening the window of a dark room. The light comes in and the monsters run away." Milena stared at her for a moment, evaluating her. "Mom used to say something like that. She seems to have been very wise." "You're not going to replace her," Milena said suddenly, her voice firmer. "No one can." "I don't want to," Tabitha replied, sincerely. "Each person is unique and irreplaceable. Your mother will always be your mother, Milena. I'm just here to help you and your brother with whatever you need." The tension in the girl's shoulders eased slightly. "Can you stay here until I fall asleep?" "Of course I can." Outside the room, Hater Sterling watched the scene through the ajar door, surprised by the calm and wisdom with which Tabitha had dealt with his daughter. He had returned early from a cancelled meeting and intended to check on the children before retiring. What he had witnessed left him intrigued. None of the previous nannies had achieved this approach with Milena. As he walked away, silently so as not to be noticed, a persistent thought bothered him. Who really was Tabitha Frary? And what secret did she carry behind those blue eyes, as transparent as they were melancholy? The next morning, Tabitha was preparing breakfast when Hater entered the kitchen, surprising her. He rarely appeared before the children were ready for school. "Good morning, Miss Frere," he said, pouring himself coffee. "I heard there was an episode with Milena last night." Tabitha felt a shiver down her spine. Was she being tested? "Yes, sir. She had a nightmare about her mother. I managed to calm her down." Hater watched her over his coffee cup. "Mrs. Stern informed me that you stayed with her until she fell asleep." "Singing?" Tabitha blushed slightly. "I apologize if I overstepped any boundaries. It was a lullaby my mother used to sing to me." "I'm not criticizing," he replied, his tone a little softer. "In fact, it's the first time in months that Milena hasn't woken up screaming again the same night." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Tabitha continued preparing the children's lunchboxes, aware of Hater's penetrating gaze on her. "Miss Frere," he finally said, "I'd like to know why someone with your previous training would accept this type of job." The question caught her off guard, causing her to drop a spoon. How did he know? Had he investigated her past? The thought made her even more nervous. "We all need to start over at some point, Mr. Sterling," she replied vaguely, avoiding his gaze. "Interesting," he murmured, placing the cup on the counter. "Because I needed to too." Before Tabitha could process the meaning of those words, Enrico entered the kitchen, still in his pajamas, but already with the tablet in his hands. "Dad, are you going to the school presentation today?" the boy asked, without greeting anyone. Hater frowned. "What presentation?" The science fair. I told you last week, my project on renewable energy. Enrico's voice was monotonous, as if he already expected the answer. Tabitha watched Heiter's expression change, a flash of guilt quickly masked by practicality. I have a crucial meeting today, son. I can't reschedule. Enrico shrugged, but Tabitha noticed how his fingers tightened on the tablet. Whatever. Milena is still sleeping. I'll wake her up, offered Tabitha. As she passed Enrico, she commented casually, Renewable energy? That's fascinating. I'd like you to tell me about your project while we eat. The boy looked at her in surprise, as if he didn't expect genuine interest from anyone. It's about solar panels. Great, Tabitha smiled. Just what I was reading about last week. When she left the kitchen, Heitor found himself watching her with growing curiosity. There was something about Tabitha Freire that didn't fit the common profile of a maid, a silent dignity, an intelligence she tried to discreetly hide, and above all, a deep understanding of pain that could only come from personal experience. What he didn't know yet was that this woman with a fragile appearance carried scars as deep as his own. And that destiny had conspired to put them on the same path when both most needed to find a reason to believe in tomorrow again. The first weeks at the Sterling mansion passed like a delicate dance between approaches and retreats. Tabitha had established a routine with the children, breakfast prepared with attention to each one's individual preferences, lunch boxes organized with small notes of encouragement hidden among the food, and a constant but never invasive presence. It was a stuffy October afternoon when the first serious incident occurred. Milena had insisted on playing in the pool despite the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. It's not safe with this weather, Milena, Tabitha argued, while putting away the freshly ironed clothes in the girl's closet. You don't tell me what to do, replied Milena, already wearing her pink swimsuit. Dad lets me swim when I want. Tabitha sighed. Your father isn't home right now, and I'm sure he wouldn't approve with this sky threatening to rain. The girl narrowed her eyes with determination. I'm going to tell him you're being mean to me. Tell him the truth, Tabitha replied calmly, that I'm worried about your safety. Milena slammed the door, and Tabitha continued her tasks, believing that the girl had given up on the idea. 15 minutes later, lightning cut through the Los Angeles sky, followed by the thunderous rumble. That's when Tabitha realized she no longer heard Milena's footsteps around the house. A horrible premonition invaded her. Leaving the clothes aside, she ran towards the pool area. The rain began to fall as she spotted Milena floating motionless in the water, apparently unconscious. Without thinking twice, Tabitha jumped into the pool. The icy water engulfed her, awakening terrible memories, the sudden bleeding, the desperate rush to the hospital, the feeling of helplessness as the doctors tried to save her 8-month-old baby. For a moment, she felt paralyzed by panic, the memories of her own tragedy threatening to overwhelm her. Not again, she murmured to herself, forcing herself to swim. I'm not going to lose another child. She reached Milena with vigorous strokes and pulled her to the edge. The girl had hit her head when she slipped on the edge of the pool, wet from the rain. With precise movements, Tabitha checked her vital signs, relieved to confirm that Milena was breathing, despite the cut on her forehead. The rain was now falling hard, drenching both of them as Tabitha applied first aid with the competence of someone who had spent years in pediatric emergencies. It was at that moment that Heitor arrived, earlier than usual due to the storm. What happened here? His voice thundered louder than the storm as he ran towards them. She slipped and hit her head, explained Tabitha, maintaining her professional calm. The cut isn't deep, but we need to monitor her for concussion. Can you bring a dry towel, please? The natural authority in her voice made Heitor obey without questioning. When he returned with the towel, he found Tabitha whispering words of comfort to Milena, who was beginning to regain consciousness. Aunt Tabitha jumped in to save me, murmured Milena, confused. It was dark underwater. Heiter wrapped his daughter in the towel and lifted her into his arms. Only then did he realize that Tabitha was shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from something deeper. Her face had lost all color, and her blue eyes seemed glazed over, fixed on a distant point. "Miss Frere," he called, worried. "Are you all right?" Tabitha blinked several times, as if returning from some distant place. Yes, I'm fine. Let's take care of Milena." In the following minutes, Tabitha directed Milena's treatment with technical precision that did not go unnoticed by Heitor. She cleaned the cut, applied antiseptic from the first aid kit she asked him to fetch, and explained the symptoms of concussion that should be observed in the coming hours. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked, while Milena finally rested. "In her bed, the wound clean and protected." Tabitha hesitated. "First aid course," she replied vaguely. "I believe Milena will be fine, but if she presents any dizziness or vomiting, she'll need to be taken to the hospital." Heitor studied her for a long moment. "You jumped into the pool during a storm to save my daughter." It wasn't a question, but Tabitha felt she needed to answer. Anyone would have done the same. "No, they wouldn't," he contradicted. Nanny called 911 and waited on the porch because she didn't know how to swim." Heitor paused. "You're drenched and shivering. Go change before you get sick. We'll talk later." When she closed the door of her room, Tabitha finally allowed the tears to come. The incident had brought to the surface all the memories she was desperately trying to keep buried. For a moment, seeing Milena floating in the water, time had folded in on itself, and she was again in that emergency room, begging them to save her son. A light knock on the door brought her back to the present. "Miss Frere?" It was Enrico's voice, surprisingly hesitant. "Can I come in?" Tabitha wiped away the tears hastily. "Just a moment," she replied, quickly changing clothes. When she opened the door, she found not only Enrico, but also Heitor. The boy was holding a tray with a steaming cup of tea. "We made tea," explained Enrico, avoiding looking at her directly. "Dad said you might get sick after being in the rain." The unexpected kindness caught her off guard. "Thank you, Enrico. That's very kind of you," the boy shrugged, feigning indifference. "You saved my sister, and you bandaged it better than Dad." Heitor smiled slightly. "Enrico, can you check if your sister needs anything?" When the boy left, Heitor entered the room, maintaining a respectful distance. "Milena told me what happened. She disobeyed your instructions and went swimming alone." "Children test boundaries," Tabitha replied. "It's part of growing up." "And adults hide the truth," he retorted, his green eyes studying her intensely. "You're not just someone who took a first aid course, Miss Frere. The way you handled the situation. I've seen experienced doctors with less control in emergencies." Tabitha felt her heart race. "What exactly are you asking, Mr. Sterling?" "Why is a doctor working as a maid in my house?" The silence that followed seemed to weigh tons. Tabitha took a sip of tea, buying time while deciding how much to reveal. "How did you find out?" she asked finally. "I check the background of everyone who works here, especially with my children," he replied. "Dr. Tabitha Frere, a respected pediatrician with publications in medical journals, until she disappeared completely 2 years ago." Heitor paused. What happened? The question hung in the air like a loaded cloud. Tabitha looked out the window, where the storm was now dissipating, leaving traces of light between the dark clouds. "Life happened," she replied softly. "Not all stories are meant to be shared, Mr. Sterling." Surprising her, Heitor nodded. "I respect that, but I want you to know that your training isn't a problem for me. In fact, it explains why my children are responding to you in a way that they haven't responded to anyone since." He didn't complete the sentence. Since their mother passed away, Tabitha concluded gently. Children feel the truth, Mr. Sterling, even when we don't say it with words. Something changed in Heiter's gaze at that moment, an invisible wall beginning to crumble. If you intend to stay with us, Tabitha, I think you can call me Heitor. It was the first time he had used just her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice caused an unexpected shiver in Tabitha. And do you intend to stay? The vulnerability in the question was as subtle as it was undeniable. Yes, she replied firmly, if you'll have me. That night, Tabitha checked on Milena several times. On the third time, she found Heitor sitting by his daughter's bed, watching her sleep. I couldn't leave her alone, he explained in a low voice. I keep thinking about what could have happened if you hadn't been here. But I was, Tabitha replied simply. Their eyes met in the dim light of the room, and for a moment, both felt a connection that went beyond employer and employee. They were two people who understood each other's pain without needing to name it. The following weeks brought subtle changes in the dynamics of the house. Milena, after the pool incident, abandoned much of her hostility. Although she still had moments of stubbornness and rebellion, she now allowed Tabitha to comb her hair and occasionally even asked her opinion on what clothes to wear. Enrico remained more reserved, but began to share his science projects with Tabitha, surprised by the knowledge she demonstrated. One afternoon, when she was helping him with research on the human circulatory system, he asked abruptly, "Why do you know so much and work as a maid?" Tabitha smiled sadly. Sometimes life takes us down paths we don't plan, Enrico. Like when Mom died, the boy adjusted his glasses, his face trying to maintain composure. Nobody planned that. Tabitha felt her heart clench. It was the first time he had mentioned his mother directly to her. Yes, exactly like that. She hesitated before continuing. Losing someone we love changes everything, doesn't it? Enrico nodded, turning his attention back to his tablet. Dad never cries. I think it's because he needs to be strong for us. Adults sometimes cry when no one is watching, Tabitha replied softly. It's hard to show our pain, even when it's destroying us inside. The boy looked at her with an understanding beyond his years. You've lost someone too, haven't you? That's why your eyes look sad even when you smile. The child's perception hit her like a physical blow. Tabitha felt the tears threatening to fall, but she took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. Yes, I have, she admitted finally. Someone very special. I'm sorry, said Enrico, surprising her by placing his small hand over hers. It was a quick, almost embarrassed gesture, but charged with a pure empathy that only children can offer. Heitor, who was passing by in the hallway at that moment, witnessed the scene silently. The son, who had barely spoken about feelings since his mother passed, was showing empathy. Something inside him warmed and at the same time ached, a complex mixture of gratitude and a feeling he refused to name. Autumn was progressing in Los Angeles, and with it came an invitation to a charity event organized by Heitor's company. It was an important gala, with the presence of investors and influential figures in the market. The mansion was a flurry of activity with preparations. I need you to help the children get ready, Heitor explained to Tabitha on the morning of the event. Mrs. Stern will be busy with the final preparations for dinner. Of course, she replied, noting how Heitor seemed particularly tense. Is everything all right? He hesitated, adjusting his tie with restless fingers. Esmeralda will be there. Esmeralda? My ex-girlfriend. She works in the marketing department. We broke up a few months ago, but she still maintains a certain closeness with the children, something in the way he said that made Tabitha feel an unexpected pang of discomfort. I understand. "No, you don't understand," Hito sighed, running his hand through his brown hair in a rare gesture of nervousness. "Esmeralda has strong opinions about how I should raise my children, and about who should be close to them." Tabitha understood the implication. "She won't approve of my presence." "It's not her approval that we need," he replied with sudden firmness. "Actually, I would like you to attend the event." The surprise must have been evident on Tabitha's face, as Hator quickly added, "The children will be more comfortable with you around. It'll just be a formal dinner, then they'll come home while the adults continue on to the charity auction." "I don't have anything appropriate to wear," Tabitha objected, thinking about the few simple clothes she had brought. Hator's eyes sparkled with a rare smile. "I think we can take care of that." That afternoon, a box arrived for Tabitha. Inside, a teal dress with a simple but elegant cut, accompanied by shoes and a small note, "To match your eyes, H." The gesture left her speechless. It was more than just a gift from an employer. There was something personal in the choice, an attention to detail that made her blush. When night arrived, Tabitha helped Milena put on her princess dress. This time, blue like hers, while the girl chattered excitedly. "You're going to look beautiful, Aunt Tabitha," said Milena, using the affectionate term for the first time. "Dad said you're going to sit with us at the main table." Enrico appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a small suit that made him look like a miniature version of his father. "Esmeralda isn't going to like this," he commented, with the raw objectivity of children. "Enrico!" reprimanded Milena. "Dad said not to talk about that." Tabitha pretended to be busy with the girl's hair, but her heart raced. She was entering dangerous territory. Hator's world, where she would be seen not as the competent employee, but as an intruder. When she finally went downstairs, Tabitha felt Hator's gaze even before she saw him. He was in the entrance hall, imposing in his tuxedo, talking to a middle-aged man. When he saw her, he stopped in mid-sentence, his green eyes scanning her with an admiration he didn't try to hide. "Miss Frere," he said, approaching. "You look stunning." "The dress is magnificent," she replied, feeling her face burn. "Thank you very much." "It's not the dress," he murmured, offering her his arm. "Shall we? The first guests are already arriving." The event took place in a ballroom adjacent to the mansion, specially decorated for the occasion. Soft lights illuminated, sophisticated flower arrangements, and a small orchestra played ambient music. Tabitha immediately felt out of place among the elegant guests who clearly belonged to a world different from hers. "Relax," Hator whispered, as if he sensed her discomfort. "You belong here as much as anyone." But did she really? Tabitha didn't have time to ponder the question as Milena and Enrico came running towards her. "You look beautiful," she praised, genuinely impressed with the children's natural elegance. "Dad said we can stay close to you all night," informed Milena, holding her hand enthusiastically, "and that you'll take us home when we get sleepy." The trust placed in her warmed Tabitha's heart. Feeling needed, useful, able to bring comfort. It was something she had lost when she abandoned medicine. It was then that she saw her. A stunning woman with dark brown hair and magnetic green eyes, wearing a red dress that looked painted on her perfect curves. Esmeralda. Even without ever having seen her before, Tabitha knew instantly who she was. And by the way the woman's eyes narrowed when she noticed her presence next to the children, it was clear that Esmeralda had also identified exactly who Tabitha was, or thought she was. "Hator, darling," Esmeralda approached with the grace of a predator, kissing him on both cheeks with possessive familiarity. What a magnificent event! The investors are impressed. Her eyes finally landed on Tabitha, examining her from head to toe with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And who is this?" "Tabitha Frere," introduced Hator, his tone cordial but firm. She's looking after the children. The new nanny. Esmeralda raised a perfect eyebrow. Interesting to bring her to such an exclusive event. Before Heiter could respond, Milena intervened with surprising assertiveness. Aunt Tabitha isn't just a nanny, she's our friend, and Dad said she's our special guest. Esmeralda maintained the smile, but her eyes hardened. Of course, darling. Turning to Heitor, she added, "We need to talk about the opening speech. I have some last-minute suggestions." With an apologetic look at Tabitha, Heitor walked away with Esmeralda, who made a point of placing her hand possessively on his arm. "She doesn't like you," commented Enrico, observing the scene with perceptive eyes. "But don't worry, she doesn't like anyone Dad brings home." "Not that he brings many people," added Milena. "You're the first he's invited to a party since..." completed Enrico. Tabitha felt the weight of that revelation. It wasn't just an employee being included in an event. It was something more, something that clearly bothered Esmeralda and confused the children themselves. The night progressed with Tabitha alternating between moments of discomfort when she noticed the curious glances of the guests and moments of genuine joy when interacting with Milena and Enrico, who seemed determined not to leave her alone. During dinner, she was placed at the main table, as Milena had anticipated, sitting between the children. Heitor occupied the head of the table, with Esmeralda strategically positioned to his right. On the other side of the table, Tabitha noticed a man who was watching her with an uncomfortable intensity. "Who is that man?" she asked Enrico discreetly. The boy looked in the indicated direction. "Mr. Morris, the CFO of Dad's company. He always looks at women that weird way." Something in the name made Tabitha freeze. "Morris?" She watched more closely, and the realization hit her like lightning. It was him, Morris Viana, the man who had hired her ex-husband Carlos around the same time her marriage began to crumble. The man who frequented the same parties that Carlos mentioned before. He began coming home later and later when she was still pregnant. The coincidence was too disturbing. Los Angeles was big, but the business circle small. And now, here she was, sitting at the same table as a direct connection to her painful past. Would he recognize her? Carlos had certainly mentioned his doctor wife to colleagues before betraying her. Tabitha felt the panic growing, her breathing becoming difficult. She needed to get out of there. "Are you all right, Aunt Tabitha?" asked Milena, noticing her sudden paleness. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm a little tired." Tabitha forced a smile. "I think we need to go home soon, don't we?" It was then that Esmeralda, who had apparently been observing the exchange, raised her voice. "Heitor, darling, don't you think it's time for the children to retire? The nanny seems unwell." The condescending tone was deliberate, but Heitor just nodded, his eyes fixed on Tabitha with genuine concern. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly as he approached. "I just need some fresh air," she replied, aware of the curious glances around. "Can I take the children home now?" "Of course," Heitor replied. "I'll walk you to the house." "It's not necessary," Tabitha insisted. "Your guests need you." "My children are more important," he replied with a firmness that silenced any further objection. As they withdrew, Tabitha felt Esmeralda's furious gaze and Morris's growing interest. Two distinct dangers, both potentially devastating to the fragile peace she had begun to build. On the way to the main house, Heitor walked silently beside her, while the children ran ahead, finally free from the party's restrictions on behavior. "You recognize someone in there," he said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Tabitha hesitated. "What makes you think that? The way you paled when you looked across the table." Heitor stopped, turning to face her. "Tabitha, if there's something I should know..." "There are many things we all keep to ourselves, Heitor," she replied softly. Not all secrets need to be revealed. Something in her gaze must have communicated the depth of that truth, as Hator didn't insist. Instead, he did something unexpected. He reached out and lightly touched her face, a touch so brief that it could have been imagined. "When you're ready," he said simply. That night, after putting the children to sleep, Tabitha remained awake, staring at the ceiling. The worlds she had tried to keep separate were colliding. At some point, she would have to face her past, or it would find her right there, in the place where she was finally beginning to feel safe again. What Tabitha didn't know was that, at that very moment, Morris Viana was talking to Esmeralda in a secluded corner of the party, both watching Hator with calculating expressions. "So that's the new maid," commented Morris with a crooked smile. "Interesting choice, our friend." "She's just the nanny," replied Esmeralda coldly. "And a temporary one, I guarantee." "I'm not so sure." Morris swirled the champagne glass between his fingers. "There's something familiar about her, something I can't quite place yet." Esmeralda's eyes gleamed with malicious interest. "Are you saying you know her?" "Not exactly, but I believe we'll soon find out who Tabitha Frary really is." Morris's smile widened. "And what she might be hiding from our dear Hator." In the silent mansion, while the party continued in the distance, Tabitha finally fell asleep, unaware of the clouds gathering on the horizon. Her past and her present were about to collide in ways that not even she could foresee, and Hator, returning to the party with distant thoughts, had no idea that the woman who was beginning to tear down the walls, carefully built around his heart, held dark secrets that could change everything between them, forever. The November morning dawned with a clear sky over Los Angeles, but Tabitha knew the storm was approaching. A week had passed since the charity event, and the climate at the Sterling mansion oscillated between a strange peace and a latent tension that she couldn't quite name. That morning, while preparing breakfast for the children, Tabitha noticed an envelope on the kitchen table, addressed to her in Hator's elegant handwriting. Inside, a formal invitation to the opening of the new Sterling Tech headquarters, accompanied by a small handwritten note. "Your presence would mean a lot. H." The gesture left her both touched and apprehensive. Since the night of the charity event, something had changed between them. Glances that lasted a second longer, conversations that extended beyond what was necessary, a silent closeness that neither dared to name. "Good morning, Aunt Tabitha." Milena's lively voice interrupted her thoughts. The girl entered the kitchen like a small hurricane, her black hair still disheveled from sleep. "Dad said he's taking me to the mall today. Is that so?" Tabitha smiled, putting away the invitation. "Any special occasion?" "We're going to buy a gift for you," replied Milena, with the disarming sincerity of children, before covering her mouth with her hands. Oops, it was a surprise. Tabitha felt her heart race. "A gift? Why?" "Because it's your birthday next week," replied Enrico, entering. "The kitchen already dressed and organized as always. Dad saw the date on your resume." The idea that Hator had noticed her birthday, such a personal detail hidden in bureaucratic documents, caused a wave of heat to rise to her face. "You don't need to bother," she said, serving Enrico's favorite cereal. "It's no bother," replied a deep voice from the doorway. Hator was there, already impeccably dressed for work, watching the scene with a discreet smile. "Actually, I was thinking of something more elaborate than just a simple gift." Their eyes met, and Tabitha felt that silent connection that had been growing between them, a mutual understanding that went beyond words. The moment was interrupted by Hator's cell phone. Checking the screen, his expression hardened. "I have to go. Emergency at the company," he announced, returning to his usual professional efficiency. "Children, behave. Miss Frere, think about the invitation." When he left, Tabitha noticed he had left the newspaper on the table. On the front page, a headline caught her attention. Sterling Tech under investigation. Data breach shakes market confidence. At Sterling Tech headquarters, the atmosphere was one of palpable tension. Heiter went from one meeting to another, trying to contain the crisis that had arisen after the revelation that confidential data from important clients had been compromised. "How did this happen?" he demanded, facing the digital security team gathered in his office. "We're still investigating, sir," replied the head of security, visibly nervous. "But everything indicates an inside job. Someone with privileged access." The door opened and Esmeralda entered, elegant as always in her impeccable suit. "The investors are in a panic, Heiter. We need a containment strategy immediately." "I'm aware of that," he replied dryly. Since the charity event, he had maintained a professional distance from Esmeralda, bothered by the way she had treated Tabitha. "I have some ideas for the official statement," she continued, approaching closer than necessary. "We can work on it together, in private." Heiter recoiled subtly. "Morris is already taking care of it." The mention of the name made Esmeralda's eyes gleam in a strange way. "Speaking of Morris, he mentioned something interesting about your maid. Tabitha is not a subject for the workplace." Heiter cut in, more abruptly than he intended. Esmeralda smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It wouldn't be if you weren't bringing her to corporate events and inviting her to the opening." "How do you know that?" "Los Angeles is small, Heiter, especially in our circle." She paused calculatedly. "Did you investigate her past completely? Do you know exactly why a trained doctor is working as a nanny?" Something in the way Esmeralda spoke raised a red flag. "In Heitor, what exactly did Morris say about her?" "Why don't you ask him directly?" Esmeralda suggested, walking towards the door. "Maybe you'll find that your precious Tabitha isn't exactly who she says she is." When she left, Heitor remained, still a whirlwind of thoughts assailing him. He trusted Tabitha instinctively, but Esmeralda's words had planted a seed of doubt that bothered him more than he cared to admit. Back at the mansion, Tabitha was helping Milena with a science assignment when her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Laura. "He found you. Carlos is in Los Angeles and knows where you are." The panic was instantaneous. Carlos, her ex-husband, the man who had abandoned her in the most vulnerable moment of her life, who had spread lies about her among colleagues to justify his betrayal, was now in the same city, and somehow knew where to find her. "Aunt Tabitha, are you okay?" Milena's worried voice brought her back to the present. "You turned white." "I'm fine, honey." Tabitha forced a smile, but her hands were shaking. "I just need to make a quick call. Keep drawing the solar system. I'll be right back." In the hallway, she frantically dialed Laura. How did he find out? What exactly did he say? "It was through some contact in the corporate world," explained Laura. "He mentioned that a guy named Morris commented about a former doctor working for Heiter Sterling. Morris, the man at the party. The connection Tabitha feared was confirmed. What does Carlos want?" she asked, fearing the answer. "Money, probably. Or revenge," replied Laura with concern in her voice. "You know how he was when you exposed him to everyone." Yes, Tabitha knew. After discovering the betrayal, amid her grief over the loss of the baby, she had confronted Carlos publicly at a party with mutual friends, revealing not only the infidelity, but also the small financial frauds he had committed with the couple's money. Carlos's wounded pride had never recovered from that blow. "I need to get out of here," murmured Tabitha, more to herself than to Laura. "No, Tab. You can't keep running. Face him. You're stronger now." Was it true? Tabitha wasn't sure. In recent months, she had begun to rebuild herself, to find purpose again, and even fragments of happiness. The idea of losing all of that because of the ghost of her past was unbearable. Hanging up, she noticed Enrico standing at the end of the hall, watching her with a worried expression. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? Everything. "Okay, Enrico," she said, trying to sound calm. "Are you leaving?" he asked directly, his perceptive eyes fixed on her. The question caught her off guard. "Why do you think that?" "You said you needed to get out of here. And you were crying." He adjusted his glasses nervously. "Everyone leaves in the end. Mom, all the nannies, now you." Tabitha's heart clenched. She approached the boy and knelt down to be at his eye level. "Enrico, sometimes adults face complicated problems, but that doesn't mean I'm going to abandon you." "Promise?" The vulnerability in his voice was heartbreaking. "I promise that no matter what happens, I will always care about you and Milena." It was the most she could honestly promise, given the circumstances. Enrico studied her for a moment, as if assessing the truthfulness of her words. "Dad likes you," he said finally. "In a different way. He smiles more when you're around." The innocent observation made Tabitha's heart race again, but for completely different reasons. "Your father is a good man, Enrico, and he loves you more than anything." "I know that," replied the boy with wisdom beyond his age. "But he could love you too. It wouldn't be a replacement. It would be an addition." He smiled shyly, proud of the mathematical analogy. Tabitha couldn't help but smile in return, even with tears in her eyes. How to explain to a 10-year-old that adult life was rarely as simple as additions and subtractions? The day of the new headquarters opening arrived, and Tabitha still hadn't decided whether to attend. Part of her longed to see Hayter in his element, celebrating his achievement. Another part feared the almost inevitable confrontation with her past. "You should go," opined Mrs. Stern, as they organized dinner together. The housekeeper, initially distant, had gradually grown closer to Tabitha, recognizing her positive influence on the children. "The boss had this delivered for you earlier this morning. It was an elegant box containing a dress of flowing fabric in a shade of emerald green, accompanied by a note. For tonight. The color reminds me of my eyes, as your blue eyes inspired. My previous choice, I hope to see you. H." The intimacy of the gesture and the veiled message made Tabitha blush. There was something growing between them, something that not even the threat of her past could completely diminish. "Go," insisted Mrs. Stern with a rare smile. "The children will be fine with me, and you deserve a night for yourself." Hours later, Tabitha arrived at the imposing building of glass and steel that would be the new Sterling Tech headquarters. The place was filled with elegant guests, journalists, and figures from the business world. For a moment, she felt completely out of place until she spotted Hayter in the center of the main hall. He saw her almost immediately, as if his senses were attuned to detect her presence. Apologizing to the group he was talking to, Hayter walked in her direction, his green eyes shining in a way that made Tabitha's heart skip a beat. "You came," he said simply when he reached her. "The invitation seemed important," she replied with a shy smile. "You look stunning." His eyes swept over the dress he had chosen himself, appreciating how the fabric embraced Tabitha's subtle curves and how the color enhanced the delicacy of her fair skin. "Thank you for the dress. It's beautiful." "On you, yes," Hayter offered, his arm. "Come, I want to show you something before the official speech." He guided her through the crowd to a private elevator that took them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Tabitha found herself on a terrace with a panoramic view of Los Angeles. The city stretched out below them, an ocean of lights against the night sky. "It's incredible," she whispered, approaching the edge. "This is my favorite place in the entire building," confessed Hayter, stopping beside her. "Up here, the problems seem smaller, more manageable." Tabitha sensed the tension in his voice. Something's wrong, isn't it? I read about the data breach. Heiter sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture she now recognized as a sign of worry. It's more complicated than the press knows. We have evidence of internal sabotage. I'm so sorry, said Tabitha sincerely. It must be hard not knowing who to trust. Heiter turned to face her, his eyes intense in the dim light. I trust you, Tabitha. More than I should, maybe. There was vulnerability in his confession, something rare in a man used to controlling every aspect of his life. Tabitha felt the weight of that trust and the fear of not being worthy of it. Heiter, there are things about me you don't know. Then, tell me, he replied, softly moving closer. Whatever it is, we can face it together. The moment of truth had arrived. Tabitha took a deep breath, gathering the courage to reveal what she had kept hidden for so long. I used to be a doctor, as you already found out, a pediatrician. I loved my job more than anything. She paused, fighting back the emotion. I was married, 8 months pregnant when everything fell apart. My husband, Carlos, had been cheating on me for months. I found out in the worst way possible. She told him about the night when, arriving home early from an exhausting shift, she had found explicit messages on the cell phone that Carlos had forgotten to charge. The confrontation, his denial, the heated argument, and then the sharp pain, the blood, the desperate rush to the hospital. I lost my son that night, her voice failed. A rare complication with the placenta, the doctors said. It could have happened anyway, but the stress... She wiped away a tear. Carlos wasn't there when I woke up from surgery. He was with her. Heiter closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing her pain. When he opened them again, they were filled with a contained fury. He abandoned you at that moment? Tabitha nodded. It was just the beginning. When I came home, I found that he had emptied our joint accounts. He told everyone that I had had a mental breakdown, that I was unstable, obsessive. My professional reputation was tarnished. The panic attack started, making it impossible to continue in medicine. In a few months, I lost everything. My son, my marriage, my career, my home. And now he's in Los Angeles, completed Heiter, surprising her. How do you know? Morris mentioned having met your ex-husband recently. At first, I didn't make the connection, but something in the way he talked about you. Heiter approached, gently holding her arms. Tabitha, it doesn't matter what he tries to do or say. I'm on your side. The conviction in his voice was like a balm for the wounds that Tabitha carried. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that she could really start over, that she deserved the happiness she was beginning to glimpse alongside this man and his children. Heiter's cell phone interrupted the moment. He checked the screen with an irritated sigh. The opening speech. I need to go down. Go, Tabitha smiled. This is your moment. I'll be in the audience. Heiter hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more, but finally nodded. Before heading to the elevator, however, he surprised her by leaning in and kissing her forehead softly. I didn't know it was possible to feel this again, he murmured, against her skin. Thank you for showing me it was. As the elevator took him away, Tabitha remained still, touching the spot where his lips had been, a comforting warmth spreading through her body. It was in this state of contemplation that she didn't immediately notice the presence that emerged from the shadows on the other side of the terrace. I always knew you were good at winning people's trust, Tabitha, but seducing one of the richest men in Los Angeles, that's a new level even for you. The familiar voice froze her. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face with Carlos, thinner than she remembered, with wrinkles of bitterness around his eyes and mouth, but still with the same arrogant smile that had once charmed her. What are you doing here? Tabitha asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded, despite the internal tremor. I was invited, believe it or not. Carlos approached, making her recoil instinctively. Morris is an old friend. He became quite interested when I mentioned that my ex-wife now works for Hater Sterling. What do you want, Carlos? Tabitha crossed her arms, creating a physical barrier between them. Initially, curiosity. I wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true. He examined her from head to toe. The great Dr. Freire, reduced to a nanny. But now I see that you're smarter than I thought. You're aiming higher, aren't you? You don't know me anymore, Tabitha replied, and you have no right to be in my life. Carlos laughed, a sound devoid of humor. On the contrary, darling, I have every right to be wherever I want, especially when it involves exposing who you really are. The fear turned into indignation. And who am I really, Carlos? The woman you cheated on when she was pregnant, the woman you abandoned when she lost her son, or the woman whose money you stole to support your affair? His expression hardened. The mentally unstable woman who had a breakdown and tried to destroy my reputation with false accusations. False accusations? Tabitha took a step forward, driven by an anger she had suppressed for too long. I have the bank statements, Carlos, the phone records, the messages I saved, everything. For the first time she saw uncertainty in his eyes. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying I'm not afraid of you anymore, Tabitha replied with a calmness that surprised herself. I spent 2 years blaming myself, hiding, allowing your lies to define me. It's over. Carlos regained his composure, his face assuming a calculating expression. Does your billionaire boyfriend know about the diagnosis of severe depression, about the medications you were taking, about how you neglected our marriage because of your obsession with work, forcing me to seek solace elsewhere? Each word was a stab, meticulously designed to hit her most vulnerable spots. The old pattern. Carlos distorting reality to make her the culprit for his own mistakes. Tabitha was about to respond when a voice interrupted. Actually, I know about all of that. And much more. Hater was standing at the entrance to the terrace, his green eyes shining dangerously in the darkness. Beside him was Morris, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Sterling? Carlos recovered quickly, extending his hand. Pleasure to finally meet you. Morris speaks very highly of you. Hater ignored the outstretched hand, walking directly to Tabitha's side. I can't say the same about you, Mr. Montero. Hater, Morris intervened nervously. There's been a misunderstanding. Carlos just wanted to... Silence, Morris. Cut. Hater, his tone icy. I've heard enough from you two in the last few hours. Tabitha looked at Hater, confused. Weren't you giving your speech? Some things are more important. He turned to Carlos. Like, for example, confronting the man who, along with my CFO, planned to use personal information to blackmail my company. Carlos paled. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Hater smiled coldly. Maybe the emails between you and Morris will refresh your memory, or the records of bank transfers from the last few weeks. Or perhaps, he pulled a small device from his pocket, this recording of your conversation 2 hours ago, discussing how to use Tabitha to pressure me into paying for your silence about an alleged affair between us, which would tarnish my public image. Morris took a step back. Hater, I can explain. The only explanation that interests me, interrupted Hater, is how confidential data from our company leaked under your supervision. But that can wait until tomorrow, when you and your lawyer meet with our legal team. He turned to Carlos. As for you, I suggest you leave my property immediately, unless you prefer to discuss with the police the charges of attempted extortion and conspiracy. For a moment it seemed that Carlos would argue, but something in Hater's gaze made him reconsider. With a last spiteful look at Tabitha, he headed for the elevator, followed by a downcast Morris. When they were alone, Tabitha turned to Hayter, still stunned by the events. "How did you know?" "Esmeralda," he replied, surprising her. "Ironically, she was the one who alerted me. Apparently, Morris invited her to participate in the scheme, but she refused. As complicated as our history is, she has limits she won't cross." "So you missed your speech because of me," Tabitha commented, feeling guilty. Hayter approached, taking her hands in his. "Actually, I gained something much more valuable. Clarity." His fingers caressed hers softly. "For weeks I've been trying to understand what I feel for you, fighting the fear of opening up again after losing Helena." "Your wife," Tabitha completed softly. "Yes, when she passed I swore I would never allow anyone to become so essential to me again." He smiled sadly. "And then you appeared, saved my daughter, returned the sparkle to my children's eyes, and slowly, without me realizing it, broke down all my defenses." Tabitha's heart raced. "Hayter, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "When I found out that Carlos was here, that he planned to hurt you again, I realized that nothing else mattered. Not the speech, not the inauguration, not the company. Only you, your safety, your happiness." Tears began to form in Tabitha's eyes. "I'm so scared," she confessed, "to trust, to believe, to allow myself to feel again." "I am too," admitted Hayter. "But maybe we can be scared together, and maybe, with time, we'll learn to trust again." In a gesture of infinite tenderness, he touched her face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "I'm not asking for promises or guarantees. I'm just asking for a chance. For us. To see where this can take us." Tabitha closed her eyes, allowing herself to absorb the moment. After so long running, hiding, protecting herself, the idea of lowering her defenses was terrifying, but also incredibly liberating. "Yes," she whispered finally, opening her eyes to meet his. "I want that chance." Hayter's smile lit up his face in a way she had never seen before. Gently he leaned in, and this time his lips met hers in a soft kiss, a silent promise of future possibilities. When they pulled away, both were smiling, a little shy, like teenagers discovering first love. "And now?" asked Tabitha. "Now," replied Hayter, offering her his arm, "we go home. To our children. Our children." The words reverberated in Tabitha's heart like a prayer, a glimpse of a future she had never dared to imagine. 6 months later, the May sun bathed the garden of the Sterling mansion, where elegantly decorated tables had been arranged for the occasion. A colorful banner announced, "Inauguration, Miguel Freire Pediatric Clinic." Tabitha nervously adjusted the white coat she wore over a light blue dress. It had been years since she had dressed professionally like this, and the feeling was both familiar and new. "You look beautiful," commented Hayter, approaching from behind and embracing her. In recent months he had changed subtly. He smiled more, worked fewer hours, and the permanent tension in his shoulders had given way to a more relaxed posture. "I'm nervous," confessed Tabitha. "What if I can't do it? What if I'm not the doctor? I used to be." "You'll be even better," he replied with conviction, "because now you carry not only knowledge, but an understanding of pain that few doctors possess." The clinic had been Hayter's idea, a social pediatric center in an underserved neighborhood of Los Angeles, where Tabitha could resume her medical career while helping children who would not have access to quality care otherwise. The name Miguel Freire was a tribute to the son Tabitha had lost and whose memory she now honored through her work. "Aunt Tabitha, look at Milena." Enrico's lively voice called her attention. The boy was running towards her, now without the dark glasses he used to wear as a shield. In recent months, he had blossomed, trading isolation for a voracious curiosity about the world around him. Tabitha turned to see Milena, radiant in a blue dress similar to hers, distributing balloons to the neighborhood children who had been invited to the inauguration. The girl, who had once been hostile to her, now followed her around the house like an admiring shadow, absorbing every gesture and word. "She's imitating you," commented Hator with pride in his voice. "Yesterday she told me she wants to be a doctor, like you when she grows up." Tabitha's heart overflowed with emotion. The children didn't call her mother. Helena's memory was preserved and honored in the family, but the bond they had formed was deep and true, based not on replacement, but on addition, as Enrico had wisely defined months before. "Everyone ready for the speech?" asked Laura, approaching with a clipboard in her hands. Tabitha's friend now worked as the clinic's administrator, a partnership that had brought the two even closer. "Almost," replied Tabitha, adjusting the plaque. With her name on the coat, Dr. Tabitha Frere Sterling. They weren't officially married yet, but the engagement ring on her finger, placed there just 2 weeks ago during an intimate dinner with the children, symbolized the promise of a shared future. "Dr. Frere Sterling," a shy voice interrupted her thoughts. A girl of about 6 years old, with colorful braids and big eyes, was looking at her with curiosity. "Are you going to take care of sick children here?" Tabitha knelt down to be at the girl's height. "Yes, honey, and we're also going to teach how to avoid getting sick. Would you like to see the clinic inside?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. Tabitha extended her hand, which the child grabbed without hesitation. This simple gesture, the instant trust of a child, rekindled in her the certainty that she was on the right path. As they walked towards the interior of the newly opened clinic, Tabitha felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Mrs. Stern now. "Not just the housekeeper, but practically part of the family. There's someone who wants to talk to you," said the older woman, indicating with a nod an elegant figure who kept discreetly away from the crowd. Esmeralda, impeccably dressed as always, but with a different expression on her face, less haughty, more genuine. "Can you give me a minute?" Tabitha asked the girl. "My friend Millionaire can show you the offices in the meantime." When she approached Esmeralda, Tabitha didn't know what to expect. After the incident with Morris and Carlos, the woman had distanced herself both from the company and from Hator's personal life. "I just came to wish you good luck," said Esmeralda, surprising her with the sincerity in her tone. "What you're doing here is admirable. Thank you for coming," replied Tabitha, "and for alerting Hator about Morris. You didn't have to do that." Esmeralda gave a small smile. "Maybe I needed to for myself." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I loved Hator, you know. Not in the right way, maybe, but I loved him. Seeing him happy again hurts a little, but it also brings a strange peace." Tabitha nodded, understanding the complexity of the other woman's feelings. "I hope you find your happiness too, Esmeralda." "I've already started," she replied with a renewed glimmer in her eyes. "I accepted a position in New York, a new beginning." They exchanged a look of mutual understanding, two strong women who had learned, each in their own way, that starting over required as much courage as moving forward. As Esmeralda walked away, Hator approached, watching the exchange with curiosity. "Everything okay?" "Yes," replied Tabitha, intertwining her fingers with his. "Just another cycle closing." The time for the inauguration speech had arrived. Under the gentle afternoon sun, Tabitha stepped onto the small stage set up in the garden, with Hator, Milena, and Enrico by her side, her family, built not by blood ties, but by daily choices of love and commitment. Looking at the diverse audience, healthcare professionals who would work at the clinic, children and families from the community, friends who had supported her in the darkest moments, Tabitha felt an almost indescribable emotion. 2 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady. "I lost everything I believed defined who I was. My son, my career, my security. I thought I would never recover. She paused, feeling Hater's hand squeeze hers in silent support. What I didn't realize then is that sometimes we need to lose who we think we are to discover who we truly are. The Miguel Freire Pediatric Clinic is born today not just as a medical center, but as a symbol that it's possible to transform pain into purpose, loss into legacy. Her eyes met those of Milena and Enrico, who were watching her with genuine admiration. I learned from two extraordinary children that family isn't defined by blood, but by whom we choose to love and protect every day. And I learned from an incredible man, she smiled at Heitor, that broken hearts can still be whole when they find the perfect complement. As she finished her speech and cut the symbolic inauguration ribbon, Tabitha was enveloped in a collective embrace, Heitor, Milena, and Enrico surrounding her like a fortress of love. In their arms, she finally understood the truth she had sought so much. There were no separate two worlds, just a single world of endless possibilities for those who have the courage to believe again. That night, after the celebrations, when the children were already asleep and the house was silent, Tabitha and Hater remained on the veranda, watching the starry Los Angeles sky. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, tracing soft circles on her hand. "About how unpredictable life is," replied Tabitha, leaning against him. "A year ago I was working as a maid, trying to hide who I was, afraid of the past. Today you are free," completed Hator, kissing her forehead. "We are," she corrected, turning to look him in the eye. "You were also carrying invisible prisons, Hator." He nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "You know what Milena told me last night when I put her to sleep?" "What?" "That Mom would have liked you." His voice cracked slightly. "Because you don't try to take her place, but you build your own space in our hearts." Tabitha felt the tears coming to her eyes. "She really said that, in those exact words," confirmed Hator. "Out of the mouths of babes comes the purest truth," completed Tabitha, remembering the saying her own mother used to repeat. Hator held her face in his hands, looking at her with an intensity that still made her shudder. "I love you, Tabitha Freire, for everything you are, for everything you've overcome, for everything we've built together." "And I love you, Hator Sterling," she replied, feeling each word as an absolute truth, "for showing me that it's possible to find light even after the deepest darkness." As their lips met under the starry sky, Tabitha knew for sure, no matter how devastating the losses of the past, they had been only the necessary prelude to the extraordinary life that now began. A life built not despite the scars, but through them, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more valuable for having been almost lost. And somewhere beyond the stars that witnessed that perfect moment, she felt that her son Miguel smiled, satisfied, to see that his brief existence had not been in vain, but rather the catalyst of a story of redemption and love that would continue to transform lives for many years to come.